Hi, and welcome to the THC show with Neil. This is a show where we try to talk about the truth about the matters that are there, and some of that's not very nice, so we try to give you some hope about the future and what can be done about it. And we try to tell you some of the ways that we can help to change things in our world. We'll try our best to stimulate and motivate and educate as we go. And we're going to talk a lot about medical cannabis and access to medical cannabis, the state of affairs with respect to so-called legalization, and what's not right in this world and with respect to cannabis and those sorts of things. It's a lot about prohibition. When I was originally asked to do the show and wanted to come up with a name for it, I thought maybe unpacking prohibition might be an option for a name, because really it's prohibition that's driven all of this. It's prohibition of cannabis and the other plant medicines that's caused us so much trouble in our world and caused so much harm and damage that it's the one topic that there's just so much to talk about that we can do show after show about the issues to do with prohibition. And what I want to talk a little bit about today with respect to the problems of prohibition is the police. It's very unfair to the police that this so-called legalization is once again throwing them under the bus. I want to like the police. I always wanted to like the police. When I was a kid growing up, my dad wanted to be a police officer. However, I got into a lot of trouble when I was a kid growing up on the downtown east side and smoking cigarettes and stealing my cigarettes and all kinds of stuff, and got out to Surrey because my parents thought that moving me out of the city and into Surrey would be a better idea. Not so much. But, I found that I was at odds with the police for sure growing up, being a kid getting into trouble and stuff like that. And that was fine because, I probably shouldn't have been doing some of the things I was doing back then, and that's what we need police for. But when it came to underage drinking and using cannabis and the other drugs, certainly the police were the enemy, and that's how I saw them. Now, like I said, I had an interest in law, and I wanted to respect the law, and I wanted to respect police. But I found out when I got out of my parents' home, around 16, I managed to get a vehicle and put a bed in the back of my Volkswagen Beetle, and I wasn't home very much after that because I wasn't very happy at home. I didn't like the way I was being treated by my father, and I thought the rules were too strict. And I couldn't wait to be free and to get out into the world, and I found that I wasn't free. I was a kid in somebody else's kindergarten. There was a whole bunch of rules that I didn't like out there either. And the police were my enemy. And I still wanted to smoke weed and that sort of thing. So it's very unfortunate that we have these prohibitions on consensual crimes. I brought with me again today a book by Peter McWilliams that talks about making consensual activities a crime and how wrong that is and why it's wrong. And Peter, bless his heart and may he rest in peace, did an excellent job of laying out just how wrong it is, how ludicrous it is, and how much trouble and destruction is caused by public servants or governing bodies trying to tell people what they should and shouldn't do with their own bodies and with their own lives when they're not hurting other people. So one of the victims in all of that is the police. I met a police officer recently and had a chat with him about the way things were for police, and that he's not a very likable fellow. He's not liked very much by the public. He gets a lot of grief for mostly pursuing cannabis crimes and drug-related crimes. But in general, it's all, we understand that there's a lot of corruption that happens because of drug prohibition and the big money that's there. And, if you can buy a cop, you can do a lot with that. And so there's a lot of opportunity for corruption amongst police forces. There's a lot of peer pressure amongst police forces to not speak the truth or not speak out about what's not right there. There's a few officers probably have vested interests in keeping things the way that they are. And for a long time, it was very, very difficult for any police officer to say anything about prohibition not being the right way to go and that it causes more problems than it actually solves. I think that police actually start out as good people. I think that they're the kids that play with their toys, and they want to be the good guy that comes in and beats up the bully or protects the innocent person from the bully or the bad guy. And that's the games they play as kids, and that's how they evolve into that type of a role as a human being. But I think when they get into policing, they find out, like I found out about getting out of my parents' house, that it wasn't what I thought it was. I think that they find out when they get into policing that it isn't quite like they would hope it was either, that They don't really do a lot of protecting innocent people from bullies. They do a lot of revenue generating for the state, and they do a lot of cleanup afterwards when something bad happens and something's been stolen or something. They come along and take fingerprints and do a bit of cleanup, but they rarely ever stop anything in progress. They sometimes find the perpetrators after the fact, and then it's whether or not the courts punish those people enough or not. I know it's very frustrating to be a police officer. This particular officer that I was talking to, he told me that his brother was a fireman, and he was lamenting how much his brother is loved by all of the public, and yet he's despised. And that's specifically because of the task that they have of enforcing drug prohibition. And young people early on figure out that they've got to be afraid of the cops, and that the cops can really mess them up and ruin their lives. They can be sitting somewhere with a friend, having a wonderful experience, having a spiritual experience, sharing some magical vapors between the two of them, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, from behind comes some police officer, and you're under arrest, and you're in handcuffs, and I'm stealing all of your stuff, and I'm bringing you into court, and maybe we're going to put you in jail, and all of those sorts of things. And so the police become very hated, and I don't think it's very fair to them that our governments are maintaining these prohibitions. And I know that maybe for those of you who aren't familiar with this show or what we've said in the past or what other activists are saying, but the legalization that we've been given by our liberal government at this point is very, very far from what legalization we've been fighting for all these years and what we've been demanding for all these years. What we wanted was for the government to stop wasting our tax dollars, stop using our police resources to try to prevent people from ingesting a herbal medicine that they think is going to help make them feel better. And we don't want that money wasted, and instead with legalization we've got even more money going towards enforcement. We've got even more things that are considered crimes. We've got increased penalties on things to do with cannabis and passing joints to young people and things like that, or dealing outside of the system. The licensing fees in general are absolutely outrageous for if you wanted to set up a legal store. But beyond that, the restrictions on what you can do there are make it so that people in the know, anybody from the cannabis community would never want to shop there, would never want to have those products, wouldn't want to support what those people are all about. And that really has to change, and we really need to change that. But the police are a big part of that, and we need them to be on our side. They deserve to be liked as human beings. The government is being very unfair to them to task them with these prohibitions and enforcing these prohibitions. I personally, would really like to do violence to the community safety unit that is out there shutting down dispensaries. And I'm not a violent person, but they really do instill feelings of violence within me when I think about what those people are doing, when I think about the harm that they're doing, and the people who are not only losing their jobs in these dispensaries as they shut down, but the patients that are being denied access to what is a life-saving medicine for most of them, or in many cases. And it's just not right that the police are being put in that position. The police are also having their lives put at risk because of prohibition. Because as much as Trudeau lied through his teeth to us about what legalization was going to be all about, and he said that he was going to dismantle the underground market for cannabis because he was going to have pricing that would put them out of business. And that's really the only way to do it. You've got to have better product at cheaper prices with some sort of guarantee, or you're not going to put the black market or the underground market out of business. And that's what he said he was going to do, and that's how he said he was going to do it. I saw an eighth of weed available from a craft grower through a dispensary the other day that was $75+. No, not with, that's just for an eighth of weed. I can't even get the words out of my mouth properly because it's just so wrong. And that's not going to put anybody out of business. That's going to cause the underground market to thrive, as it always has. And I guess it's going to continue, even though really it should be brought into the mainstream. We have a vibrant, entrenched, wonderful market of supplying cannabis and distributing cannabis throughout Canada from all of these growers and dealers. And none of them are being included into our legal system. They're all still being considered criminals, and even increased penalties, as I mentioned, and increased money for enforcement on those people. So we've got a long way to go. And the underground supply of cannabis and other drugs, in some cases, is being handled through organized groups that use violence to secure their interests and to settle their problems and all those types of things. And there again, the police are right in the middle of all of that. They've got to not only put their lives right at risk when they're chasing down people who've been shooting other people, when there's public shootings and things. We have officers scouring the neighborhoods looking for the perpetrators. If they're unlucky enough to come across the perpetrators, they might end their lives right there. So they're in a lot of danger because of prohibition. They're not liked by the public because of prohibition, and they're not doing what they really want to do in their hearts, which is to do good, to give us a safe society, and to keep bad people from hurting innocent people. And so it's just not right. I mean, there is one other aspect, and I hesitate to touch on it because, we don't like to put down alcohol, but thank God we have alcohol to compare things to in a world where they want to prohibit cannabis with the criminal law. Alcohol is used responsibly by many people, and it's an asset in their life, and that's fine. And anybody should be able to use anything they want if it helps them in their life. And even if it doesn't help them in their life, they should be able to use it. They shouldn't be able to use things that harm other people. And so, that's where the bottom line is. And you can't say that you're hurting somebody by being an alcoholic because your mother is unhappy about that, and you're hurting her by being an alcoholic. And so therefore, they're going to make it illegal for you to drink alcohol. That just never ends. You can find that out in Peter's book. That when you start prosecuting people and punishing people for hurting other people's feelings because they don't like how you're living your life, well, pretty soon we'd all be in jail is what would happen, and it's just no way to spend our precious tax dollars, and it's not right to be even carried out in the hands of our governments because they can't be responsible for what's right and wrong in your life. You need to be responsible for that. And as soon as they start telling you what you can and cannot do, well, that's going to cause all sorts of things, and you might be doing things you wouldn't do otherwise just because they're telling you can't, and we don't like that, and we don't respect that, and they should stop doing that. But a lot of the crime and things that police deal with in our society are problems that result from the misuse of alcohol or people using alcohol, and it has a bad effect on them. And that's a large percentage of what the police are doing in our society, is dealing with the fallout from the misuse of alcohol. And if we had cannabis legalization properly in our world and we had proper access to cannabis, well, we know that the consumption of alcohol rates go way down and the binge drinking goes way down. And the problematic consumption of alcohol would go way down. Cannabis is a substitution for a lot of different things, and it really is a good substitute for people that are having troubles with consuming too much alcohol and the resulting problems. So that's another way that we could give our police a break, is by allowing proper access to cannabis so that we have less alcohol and then they have less of those types of jobs to look after. So that's kind of where I am with that rant, although there's a lot of things to rant about with that. I guess what we'll do now is we'll get to the news. We have a few stories in the news this week. Once again, haven't heard of any more dispensary raids. That's 2 weeks in a row. I think we're stuck, thanks to Freddie and the One Man Smoke Show and his tracking of that. I think we're stuck at 536 dispensary raids. I know there's a number of people that are in dispensaries that are either shutting down in fear of a dispensary raid, so it kind of actually works like a dispensary raid anyway. The Farm here on the downtown east side, a wonderful dispensary that was operating here for the last few years, has had to shut down and get themselves into the queue for trying to become a government store. And that is really a shame, and that's again part of this enforcement on shutting down these dispensaries. Many of them are shutting down voluntarily. I know that in Gibson's, the S&M Sweet Shop there, they've been manning their store 24/7, expecting a visit from the CSU to try to shut them down anytime, and they're living in fear. I think they've reduced their staff down to 3 because of it. It's really sad times with respect to dispensaries being closed down. In Nova Scotia, Chris Enns, a wonderful warrior for the Cannabis Crusade here, if I can frame it like that, has had his dispensary shut down. He's facing charges on that, and he's launched a constitutional challenge. It's a human rights issue, the lack of access to medical cannabis, and so he's got that going on. His next court date in Halifax, I believe, is September 13th. So if you're in that area, get out there and support Chris as he leads the charge on that constitutional challenge. Meanwhile, here in BC, we still haven't got the results of the appeal from the constitutional challenge brought forward by several dispensaries in Vancouver. They lost their appeal to have a stay put in place so that they could stay open, waiting for their appeal, but that hasn't happened, and they lost that. So many of them also had to close their dispensaries as a result of that, and they're waiting to see what the decision is on the appeal of that case. So we've got a couple of those things going on in BC. Meanwhile, in the LP world, there's the 2019 Grow Up Awards Gala. I'm not going to tell you where or when it's happening. I think that's disgusting that these legal cannabis suppliers would be passing out all kinds of awards. And the list of awards is mind-boggling. They've got more categories than there are LPs, I think. Shoppers Drug Mart is up for an award for retail distribution of cannabis, of all things. This is all just part of this, very distasteful legal world that we have that's going on. And meanwhile, while they're all patting themselves on the back and trying to claim that they are the pioneers that brought us legalization and criminalizing the pioneers that actually got us here and continuing to chase them down and discredit them, they're losing money. Once again, Freddie with the One Man Smoke Show, and I hope you keep doing your show, Freddie. I think that, or at least I hope you keep doing something, and I know you will, brother, because I know you're talking about stepping back from activism, but I know your heart, and I know that you are a guy that is pissed off about things as I am, and many of us are, and I think you're going to be having a very hard time stepping back and not doing something about it. You've been doing a lot about it. You're a voice in the wilderness that not many other people have echoed, and you've been right for the most part about all that you've been saying about the corruption that's going to happen and the takeover of our cannabis community. And on behalf of a whole lot of us, Freddie, we want to see you continuing on and doing this. We need you, buddy. We don't need less of you. We need more of you. And I know your concern is that there's not the right unity within the community. But we need you to be part of that unity, and you always have been, a real bridge for a lot of different views that bind us together. So keep doing your show. But he posted today from his show on Facebook account that Yahoo is reporting Canopy Growth is reporting $1.3 billion losses in the first quarter of business this year. $1.3 billion in losses. I can't even fathom how that's possible. I know Neil was trying to do the math on that, and it just doesn't work out. So I'm not sure what they're doing and why they're fudging their books like that, but man, oh man, they're not doing well. And the reports all over are that they're at least they're reporting that they're not doing well. I don't think they're doing too well. I don't think they should do too well. I know that it is told, CBC was doing a thing earlier today on their radio about a grandfather and a grandson smoking weed together, and one of the comments that came out of that show, a beautiful show, by the way, thanks CBC, is that there's a lot of people that are trying cannabis for the first time because now it's legal, and they're going to the government stores and they're being legal about it, and they're using some of that cannabis. Well, at the prices that they're charging, with the over-packaging that everybody's got to be concerned with. If you buy something from there and you've got all this packaging, you've got to be going, what the hell is this all about? And the quality of the cannabis that's inside that packaging is such that it's not going to take very long, and I'm sure it's already happened over and over again because every weekend there's more parties, and as people go to parties and they try other people's chronic that is actually good, properly grown cannabis that's not in over-packaging and that type of thing, that they're finding out that cannabis is a wonderful commodity that can be bought for much less than they're selling at the government stores for much better quality, and I'm sure they're switching over. On another kind of related note, more places are losing money, even the provinces, although the tax collector's making a lot of money on the sales that they got going on. But there we have the 419 warning. We're going to get right to the 420 moment in a minute. Agram has had its license revoked by Health Canada for unauthorized activities, and that's got to make Canada Trust very nervous because they have very similar unauthorized activities going on, and apparently they can lose their license, not like the rest of us who can go to jail for years, but they can lose their license to sell if they happen to set up a number of illegal rooms, not jail time or even fines probably by the looks of it, but they're going to lose their license maybe, and at least that's a step. So there you have it. That's the news. That warning was for 420. And we're going to move to our little 420 session. We like to mark 420 every time we can. I got a guest with me again. Glenn Wells is going to come as often as he can and share some moments with us.
Every week.
I know what we want is to talk about the absurdity of the drug war while we consume cannabis. This is the one you got for me.
From New Brunswick.
All right.
So now we always talk about...
Tell us a little bit about that then. Is this the stuff in the can then?
Yeah, this is it. It's called Papa's Chronic, and it's actually grown in New Brunswick. And we always talk about BC bud, but if you smell this is pretty good. This is called Golden Berry, and it's probably the best weed that I've ever smoked from east of the mountains.
That is beautiful.
That is really, really, really nice. Yeah. So I rolled you a joint, and I paid for a can. And
I like this little can here. I mean,
yeah.
Sometimes we can get weed in these the tuna cans. It was tuna weed that came in the tuna cans. I'm told you know something about that.
Yeah, you know how they call tuna. So apparently, in Seashelt, they used to pack weed into the tuna cans, and they would send it to Seattle. And in Seattle, like when weed was traded pound for pound, a pound of weed would get you a pound of coke. They would send back cans of cocaine, and that's how it got its name tuna, because on the can it said tuna, but it was full of weed, right?
There was no tuna in the can.
No, so it all
because that would be bad if you put the tuna in the can. I know there's been a few times people tried to smuggle weed in ridiculous ways and ended up with some issues.
Yeah, and they were just doing it on the boats. They were shipping it down, and they were shipping it right back. Same way.
I had some of that. I experienced.
Oh, I've had tuna kush. I've had black tuna. I've had all kinds of different kinds of tuna.
Sharing this?
No, sorry.
You got your own? I'll share mine with Neil.
Sure, I'll share it.
Jerry. Jerry Martin's in the house. That's really good to see.
You guys gotta try this. It's really nice. Yeah. So,
beautiful.
New Brunswick is growing some good weed.
So, one of the absurd things I was thinking about, because we're going to try to talk about some of the absurdities.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that the absurdities are all about people being harmed in a very destructive drug war, but as Peter McWilliams points out, things go from being bad to worse to really bad to horrible to absurd and to funny eventually. And so one of the things I was thinking about is how when you're standing on a street corner with a bunch of your buddies there, a couple guys are smoking cigarettes, but you're passing the weed around, and all of a sudden the cops are there.
Yeah.
And then you're going through all, well, no, officer, no, we were just smoking cigarettes. Well, really, I mean, if the police gave a shit about you, they'd be concerned that you were smoking that poisonous stuff that kills millions of people every 12 months. But they're much more concerned that you're smoking some medicine that might help you feel better and help you sleep better or whatever else, Yeah. So that's kind of absurd for sure. Oh, I didn't move my mic.
You didn't move the mic.
I didn't move the mic.
Oh, and
I'm just learning. These are early days in the show. And
absurd moments. Should I tell the story about my friend and his hash?
Sure, that's a good story.
No, that was a great story. So I used to buy
a stash, folks.
In the early 90s or late 80s, we used to buy a lot of hash in Toronto because it was coming from Montreal. We had Romeo, Juliet, Gold, Seal, all kinds of different hashes. So my friend, I would go to his house, and he was a hash dealer, and he got wind that the cops were going to come and raid his house.
Wow.
So he took all his hash, and he rolled it into tiny balls and little logs, and he threw it into the cat litter. Not a single cop went near that cat litter. They searched the place.
They might now, though, if they're watching the show.
Yeah. 40 some odd years later. Or 30 some odd years later.
But, you could probably still get away with that.
Yeah.
I imagine you'd have to clean the weed off a little bit afterward, the hash off.
Well, he didn't say
hash is
the
pretty
cat
good
litter was
now.
already dirty. I think maybe he just put a new box and just made it look like it was dirty. That would be the sensible.
No, but even the kitty litter, I don't know if I'd want that on my hash. But you can just, the black hash, it balls up pretty good. It's pretty hard on the outside. You're rolling that together. It's not going to really get anything on there. You could probably run under a tap or something.
And he's got a cat, so it looks really good. I had one cat there that used to chase us.
Oh, that's a great hiding place.
Oh, yeah.
You used to sell weed on the streets, didn't you?
Yeah, young in college.
And didn't you have an event that happened to you? With stashing some weed one time?
It was some hash and some acid, so I used to sell at Young in college, and I did that for like 8 years. And as people would walk by, you go, hash, acid, right? So I did that to some lady, and some lady went and told the cops. Well, we're in Toronto, it's the summertime, and we were supposed to be going to a Pink Floyd concert that night. And I have a friend that works for Ticketmaster, and I had access to 11th and 13th row tickets for Pink Floyd. So I had everybody's money to go buy these tickets, right? So the lady tells the cops come and say, hey, we know you got stuff on you. We want to search you. So they do a general search, my pockets, empty my pockets and all that. They didn't find anything. He said, well, we want you to take you into the alleyway and you want to drop your pants. Well, this is where I had a stash in a plastic bag. Was down my underwear, right? So I nervously go down this alley, and it's right behind the restaurant, and they put me up against this brick building, and he says, drop your pants. And I dropped my pants, and there was no bag there. It was gone. Right? So I quickly pulled up my pants and I said, see, there's nothing there. I pulled up my pants and they let me go, and I got down onto College Street and got into a cab, and because it's so humid in Toronto in the summertime, that plastic bag had stuck to the back of my ass, and my back of my ass was up against that brick building, and they didn't see a damn thing.
Well, they saw things, but they didn't see the bag, right?
They saw
Once again, the problems with being a police officer in the drug war. You're looking at some junk you don't want to be seeing sometimes, or maybe you do. I'm not sure, but you probably do. If you're
so everybody got to see the concert, and we got to feel the ground shake with the first bass note from Pink Floyd. It had quadraphonic sound. It was awesome night. So
my son was taking me to a Supertramp concert one night many years ago, and we had a lot of weed that we had saved up for that particular night. It was a very, very special night. My son, one time I took him someplace, and now this was him taking me someplace, and so we had planned for this. We got a limo down there, sticking out the top of the limo there, and just having a great time. And I had all this hash and I had all this weed and stuff on me. And we get into the Coliseum, and you walk through the door. They got all the tables set up. They got the people back there with the gloves on. They got VPD cops standing close to every table there, and they want us to empty our pockets.
Oh, no.
Well, holy shit. I can't tell you how I did it. But a little bit of sleight of hand, a little bit of distraction, and I managed to
get
everything in there. And they found paraphernalia, pipe and rolling papers and things, everything but the weed. They said, they got everything but the weed, right?
Sure, yeah.
But
I left it at home.
There again, this stupid prohibition. My son and I are out to have a real wonderful evening, the two of us.
Entertaining evening, yeah.
And we're not hurting nobody. No. We have no plans on hurting anybody, and we would never hurt anybody. And what we had on us wasn't going to hurt nobody. It wasn't going to hurt us either.
Yeah.
And yet here we are in this world. We had to go through that. I mean, there was a real good possibility that instead of going in the door to the concert, we were in handcuffs going into the paddy wagon.
Yep.
And that would have been a whole different experience for my son and I that night.
But the guy with a Mickey down his pants or something is going to go through and go get drunk tonight, and that would be totally okay.
That'd be totally okay. And in fact, if they find that Mickey, he's not in handcuffs. He's not going in the paddy wagon.
No, they just take it away.
They just take it away from him. Yep. It's not right. So.
I have another absurd story. There's an old rock and roll guy named Nash the Slash. And Nash the Slash always dressed up as Uncle Sam. So nobody ever knew what he looked like, right?
Okay.
So I used to have an uncle, a guy we used to call Uncle Jack, and he was the manager of a band called Teenage Head. And we were in Barrie, and we were playing with Teenage Head, Nash the Slash, and Honeymoon Suite in the early days. So Honeymoon Suite says that they're not going to play because the crowd is too small. And I have this bag of weed. I got a quarter ounce of weed. I just had started smoking, and I said in the dressing room, anybody can roll this bag of weed for me, I'll give you 5 joints. Well, this guy stands up, and he's bald on the top, and he's just got a little hair on the side. He says, I can do that for you. So we're sitting there, and he's rolling the joints for me. He says, who are you here with? I says, my uncle is Jack Morrow, the manager of Teenage Head. And he says, do you know who I am? And I go, no, because, Nash the Slash dresses up, and you don't know who he is. He goes, I'm Nash the Slash. And I said, my mouth just dropped, and I go, I think I should be sitting here rolling for you. Right? And me and him were great friends after that. Nice. I'd go to his house and everything on Danforth, and then he moved down by the lake and stuff like that. Oh, what a great man, and great friendship just by rolling a bag of weed.
Like anything powerful, there's positives and negatives to that, and we're trying to bring out some of the positives in this little segment of smoking our 420 joint. There's some things that are funny, at least if they're not positive. I think it's kind of funny that when I was growing up, there was violent motorcycle gangs.
Yes.
I mean, the Hells Angels and other groups were, they were to be feared. Yeah. They were nasty, drunk. Don't ever mess with them type of people. Yeah. And as time went on, the bikers have been doing the heavy lifting in Prohibition for a long time. They don't get enough credit for what they've done. I mean, I know that they have to use methods that we don't like in society, and that there's bad stuff that happens in and around that, but they're all just victims of Prohibition like everybody else. And there's always going to be enough disenchanted, angry, rebellious young people to fill those jobs that are there. And for quite a while, those groups have had the job to have the heavy lifting of moving a lot of the product to get to people. Yeah. But one of the byproducts, I think, of these groups distributing medicinal cannabis herbs to people is that they have been imbibing themselves.
Yeah.
And I know they have. I mean,
Yeah.
I know they have. And their attitudes have changed over the years quite a bit.
Yes.
You know, and it's really softened. I mean, I know they're still tough guys,
Yes.
and I know you don't fuck with them ever.
No.
For sure.
No, I live in a town.
But they don't live that angry drunk lifestyle
No.
like they used to.
Or the party lifestyle.
And the party lifestyle like they used to.
Yeah.
Now they're much more family oriented in most cases, and they're using the herb,
Yeah.
and they're using it for their aches and pains too, and they
Yeah.
understand the value of it, and it's really changed that a lot. So
They're doing some growing.
they're
too.
still up against the bigger, more dangerous gangs in the world, and
Yeah.
that's the police and the governments that are owned and operated by the corporations that
Yeah.
really terrorize all of us all the time.
I think
And that's why I'm hoping that we get legalization, real legalization, so that those gang members can also start imbibing in the herb. And maybe on Parliament Hill, our politicians won't be, into the booze as much as they are now. And believe me, they are into the booze on Parliament Hill. It starts early. The first event they go to around 11 a.m.
Oh, I know.
And
It's booze all day long.
every event is catered. They all have liquor cabinets in their offices, and there's a lot of booze on Parliament Hill,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and in the corporations as well. So let's hope that they all start using the herb, and it becomes a peace pipe,
Oh, that
and
would
that
be
gang
sweet.
softens up a lot too. And I know that's what's happening here. That's always been my thing. Is it's a
Yeah.
linchpin to getting a much better, saner, love-based world.
Yeah.
So thanks, Glenn, for coming in and helping
problem.
me have a little bit more of an
problem.
uptime here. A lot of stuff I do on the show is about being angry about stuff.
We'll get some more stories for next week.
We certainly will.
Okay.
We'll find some more. There's lots of them out there.
Yeah, if you guys know any stories, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always into reading somebody else's story too.
Very cool. So thanks
right.
for coming by. I'm
Yeah.
gonna swap you out of that seat, and we're
Yeah.
gonna put Mr. Jerry Martin into that chair and have a little chat about what's
He's
going
not
on with
here.
him.
Okay.
Where did he go?
I don't know. Maybe the washroom?
Oh, well. Maybe we'll put Jerry later. Hi, Rob. Yeah. I'm ready to act on the fly here.
Well, there's someone's phone.
Yeah, we'll get Glenn back his phone here.
Here you go, bud. Good to see you.
We're a live show. We don't do retakes and anything, so it just
you want me
you
right
see
here?
it as it all unfolds. Slide over a little bit.
All right.
Where's your sidekick?
Which one?
Well, Mick Man.
Oh, I didn't follow up. I thought you would talk to his people and his people
Oh,
would talk
no.
to your people. And,
Oh, I even posted that he was coming on the show.
Well, I hate to disappoint.
Well, we'll have to have him on for a segment with him too, because Mick's an
Yeah.
interesting character.
Definitely. Well, apologies for any confusion.
It's what happens on a live show. There's always something.
Congratulations as well on your own show. This has
Thanks.
been many years, I guess, in the making.
Well, they've been bugging me to do it for a while. I'm still not sure I'm prepared to do it, but
I was thinking back, in preparation for going on your show from the first time that we met, and it was, at least I know when I was super impressed, and then I met you afterwards when you spoke at City Hall.
Oh,
And
okay.
the cannabis licenses, and you made the comparison to sugar and alcohol and these other harms that you'd see up and down Granville Street, and yet they want to regulate cannabis more restrictively, and that always really struck a chord with me, and I think to some degree was very much an influential part that contributed to my interest in the space was that analogy, and
Cool.
taking a look around at, again, things that are regulated, that are more harmful, that are regulated in a less regulated manner than cannabis. So
Hugely, absurdly. Prior to that, you were a lawyer working in another field. You weren't really in the cannabis field to begin with, right? Was it contract law, or?
I always put my origins, I guess. My younger brother's best friend was Seth Rogen's dealer for 7.5 years. And if you watch Pineapple Express, which essentially the character Saul is based on my younger brother's best friend.
Nice.
And we all went to private school together, and pretty much in those days, if you got any sort of cannabis on the west side, been starting in the mid to late 90s, chances are, would have got it through John. And so it was seeing all these stories at a time when cannabis wasn't very glamorous. It certainly was profitable. Certainly accounted for my desire to not do that and become a lawyer. And so that's what opened up.
Yeah, I didn't properly introduce you.
Oh, yeah?
I'm just learning on this show, and hindsight is 20/20, and it occurs to me lots of, I didn't do this right, I didn't do that right, and I didn't properly introduce you. And I'm not actually sure how to properly introduce you because you've done so much. You've been involved in so many cases since I've known you. You've been to so many City Hall Board of Variance meetings and running the challenge, and there's so much. But yeah, you are, as I put on my promo, you're a pot lawyer extraordinaire.
Thank you.
And then some. So you've always had a bit of an interest in that side of things. When you got into being a lawyer, did you have that in mind? Did you think you were going to migrate into helping our cause, or did that sort of just evolve out of it?
It's a very good question. I'll be honest. I became a lawyer.
Wow, a lawyer and honest.
My honest interest
Sorry,
was...
I couldn't pass that one up.
No, it's true, right? But it was... I always felt that, I enjoy speaking. I enjoy being an advocate and arguing on behalf of others. I never liked to get into trouble myself, but I always enjoyed advocating for those that had. Even going back to elementary
you were just looking
school.
for the right debate, and you found it, because it's easy to argue for cannabis and against prohibition, hey?
And precisely, going to Catholic school and being taught Christian dogma, they were rife for argument, and I would challenge and
a lot of debate for that.
And I don't know, I think it was really boiled down to being a voice for those that don't have one. And I've been a medical patient probably my whole life, but not with cannabis. Believe it or not, one of the youngest kids in North America. I was 4 when I started Ritalin, and this was probably in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's interesting because my parents had the same concerns. Well, what about the drug on a developing mind? Well, so what if it works? And
I put that as one of my things of absurdity for earlier, is that they don't. Kids should be afraid of cannabis, but they're okay on Ritalin. That's what I actually wrote down there.
Yeah, and at one point, when I was in law school in England, I had an import license to bring more than a 6-month supply of riddle methylphenidate into the country. So yeah, that was hey Jerry, I had an import license from Her Majesty's Home Office. And that was easy. That was a couple letters from a doctor and a form.
Right.
But you try to do that with cannabis, good luck.
Well, yeah.
And I never thought of diverting my Ritalin ever to the black market. But when I look at that in hindsight, I probably could have paid for law school that way. You certainly could divert a lot more and make a lot more profit with diverting Ritalin than you would from cannabis flower. So I always thought, what a ridiculous analogy. They're treating this plant like it's toxic waste.
And I think like all of us activists on that side of things know that the reason for that is because of the value of cannabis, that it is such a wonderful, amazing, natural occurring plant that it really threatens the bottom line of a lot of corporations that have synthetics and other substitutes that they can patent. And that's where the real harm from cannabis comes, is to the bottom line profits of people that would like to sell things that cannabis competes with, because Mother Nature's given us an amazing gift, and it's so valuable. That's certainly being borne out with the so-called legalization, with some of the projections of what the stocks are going to be worth and all the rest of that. There's a lot of people that like cannabis. It works well for a lot of people that need what cannabis offers. And that's why it was demonized and prohibited and all the rest. And that's still why it's being demonized and prohibited, and all this talk about public safety, and we need regulations up the yin yang, and all this packaging. And on the packaging, this is not from any licensed production facility, but it's one that maybe would like to be, because I guarantee you that this popcorn was not made by one of those and given to us at the CSP to distribute, but it has a little warning with the THC on the stop sign there, which is something that Health Canada is requiring, and all of that stuff. It's to the point of absurd. One doesn't need to look too closely into it. It's a crazy dichotomy that on the one hand, there's this dangerous plant that requires the criminal law to protect people from, and even possession is a serious criminal offense. But on the other hand, that same herb is a miraculous healing herb that people are using for all kinds of different serious medical issues. So which is it? Which is it? Is it a dangerous herb that sick people should be afraid of? Or is it a wonderful healing herb that the corporations should be afraid of? Well, it doesn't take much to figure that out. So I'm framing a question for you, is what I'm doing.
There's a question in there.
There's a question in here. Because licensing fees of $30,000 from the city of Vancouver to allow cannabis to be dispensed in relation to, I think it's $176 for a license to have a pharmacy. And there's no license anywhere close to $30,000. That's way the hell out. The P&E is $15,000, and that's for like 400 companies all at once for a 2-week period.
Well, yeah, and a body parlor was
$12,000 or $11,000. The biggest casino is in that same neighborhood, but $30,000. And there, the government's trying to keep people from committing sins. Is what that's all about. They want to, don't gamble, don't use prostitutes. We're going to license the shit out of it to try to keep you from doing that. With cannabis, these are places that are offering people a medicinal herb to help them feel better in their lives. There's no sin involved in using cannabis. So my point is, at what point does it become suable, or you can go after them? You can go after them for this? Like, can we not sue the government for abuse of power, for contempt of the populace, abusing our funds, in criminalizing something with so much money that really should be encouraged? Isn't there a way that we can go after these people, damn it?
I'm sure you can. Whether or not you'll be successful is another factor to consider.
Why would it be a problem to be successful? What are the obstacles in our court system that make it so hard? Because I think it's a no-brainer.
There's a concept called parliamentary sovereignty. And so that's the will of a sovereign parliament. And again, that's the Queen sitting in, power, with the executive and the legislature making power, as is done in the process.
So the word sovereign.
So if they come out and say, we intend to regulate cannabis in this manner, that is regarded by the courts and everyone else as the law of the land, and presuming it goes through the 3 readings and then the Senate becomes a law,
okay,
it becomes a passed legislation. The difficulty, though, is to get to that stage where the law is passed and it goes through all of those checks and balances. There's the presumption that Parliament has the authority and the will, and there's no bounds and fetters on that power.
No bounds and fetters.
No, well, hold on. If it's ruled for proper purpose. And so you'll see that even though you may not like how the Cannabis Act has been drafted, that's still, at the end of the day, the Crown lawyers will say this is the will of Parliament after vast consultation with a task force, and then we had all of these different consultation periods. We got the input and we fulfilled the will. And so it's
all right. I get that they get to do it.
Yes,
I get that they get to do it. I don't get that they get to keep doing it when the evidence is clear that they're not meeting their objectives by doing it, and that there's significant harm resulting from doing it. At what point does a law become of no force and effect when it is creating more harm than it is preventing?
You know what? That is a great question, but there isn't an answer to that. There is not a magic bullet.
So the way we do it is we have people like yourself that will, on behalf of all the rest of us, go in there and argue that what you're doing is hurting people. You're not meeting your objectives. You're not curtailing drug abuse and the problems with that whatever behavior, and you're making it worse. The unintended consequence of making. So we need you to argue that and be successful. Why is that hard?
Well, why is
that hard? I mean, is a judge not supposed to be a learned person above most learned people that is able to make sense out of what's right and wrong? And I know it's a cut and dry, black and white, this is wrong.
Law is hardly any black and white. It's pretty much what you can prove and what you can argue. And I guess the way to illustrate your question is, it's a big uphill battle.
That's what I want to know. Why is it such a big uphill battle? We've got the 2002 Senate report. We've got the Vienna Declaration. We've got the letter to the government by our mayors and all of the previous justice ministers of BC. They've got nothing that I've ever seen. I mean, that's not true. That's not true. I have heard people like Dr. Daly get up and say cannabis is dangerous and it causes psychosis, and I've seen that. But really, I mean, it's easy to put down what she's saying, with studies that have been done. And
here's the problem.
I think it's easy.
That's just one aspect. Not only are you dealing with Dr. Daly, then you got to deal with Dr. Hasselback at the Vancouver Island Health Authority, and he says a lot of the similar things. which
with nothing to back it up, really.
with the people that unfortunately that are the people that are getting access to government, that government is listening to, don't really have a clue what they're talking about. And so here's the answer to your question. Fortunately, groups like yourself that are operating and providing a service and getting access to people who need it, well, it's unfortunately groups like that are forgotten and get lost and they fall through the cracks.
Well, they're not paying any attention to us, which is very strange. When we are putting on a spectacle twice a week at Van Duyn, hundreds of people lined up for hours. I put signs all over my truck now talking about what we're doing, and it is we're putting 300 care packs twice a week into the downtown east side of high dose edibles, and we're making a big difference. We got the attention of City Council. Rebecca Bly passed that motion based on what we're doing, but we have never had Coastal Health there, even though they got up before council and said that cannabis is a problematic substance for the downtown east side, a vulnerable population, and possible psychosis and schizophrenia and anxiety. They said all of that. We're not getting the attention that we should for the spectacle that we're putting on. We're not having government come and see what we're doing. We're not having the health officials come and see what we're doing. We're not having the media come and see what we're doing. It's like there is a dedicated attempt to ignore what we are doing, even though what we're doing is having an amazingly positive effect at a crucial time in our history. So I don't get why. I guess it's those corporations.
Look, it's the same reason that we had so much difficulty fighting and suing the city of Vancouver. They get a political agenda or a policy, and that's it, man. Just passing it is, you got people putting their reputation and their political careers bringing in these programs. But let's not forget that the Vancouver dispensary regulations was never about regulating dispensaries. I mean,
it wasn't about providing access to cannabis. It was about shutting down dispensaries, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say. It was an elimination strategy presented to everybody as a regulatory policy.
How can they do that? How do they get away with that? It's not the role of government to stifle business and to interrupt commerce between people. Why do they get to do that?
They do it all the time, and unfortunately, there are instances and chances where government do go too far, and those are the instances whereby charter actions can be brought out of.
Which is what you were trying to
achieve. But the
then.
difficulty now at this stage of the game is the Cannabis Act and to some extent the MMAR was all done for the purpose of trying to stifle any of the existing access, whether it be compassion clubs, dispensaries, online sales, cooperatives, neighborhood collectives, whatever you want to call it. All those models that grew out of the mid 90s to the last year, we're all doing that. And why do you think that they did not adopt any of that? They turning a blind eye to something, with all due respect, is different than trying to regulate it. Now that they've looked at it, legally, the first thing you learn in tort law, at least I did at law school, was a case called O'Donoghue and Stevens, and everyone remembers that case because it involved a bottle of ginger beer and a worm that got into the ginger beer, and it determined the legal principle of reasonableness test, and ultimately what's called duty of care, meaning that you owe a duty of care who will use your product, and it goes to the extent of the ultimate consumer. So they argued that they didn't owe the ultimate consumer, the person that bought it at the store. It's just like a can of Coke. You find a needle in that can of Coke. Coca-Cola Company is responsible. They have a duty of care to the ultimate consumer. So if you now apply those common law tort principles into a black market situation where you're selling weed from God knows what source, produced by who knows the standard. And now I'm not saying that black market cannabis can't be produced to a top quality standard, but from the point of view of a regulator, that's a big hurdle where they think, wait a minute, we can't have a licensed business selling a product from an unlicensed, unregulated source from a premises that's unlicensed and unregulated.
So from their point of view, it's all about a fear of litigation. That they're just trying to prevent themselves from being subject
I
to
think
a lawsuit.
litigation is a huge part of it, because at the end of the day, municipalities and governments do owe a duty of care. But that duty of care can be curtailed and limited if it is the express will and intention of Parliament. You see what I mean? And then by that
but like
point,
you say, sometimes they go too far. And obviously with cannabis, they're going too far. They're regulating like as if it was some sort of dangerous commodity, whereas in fact it's one of the safest things that you would ever find out there.
I agree. But
so is the common law come into play anywhere in our world here in
well,
Canada?
I think the common law would have come into play a lot sooner than cannabis when we look at the overall circumstances. I mean, you only have to go back to John Locke and the appeal to heaven, at the point by which government began to rule without the best interest and the will of the common man in the forefront. There is the appeal to heaven, which means you can, in theory, raise arms and take back that power. However, taking back that power is a little more difficult than storming a hill and overthrowing a castle.
It used to be off with their heads.
Right?
It's a lot easier.
But that's ultimately where, your point is valid. If they're, like, and I used to say this, and I'll, use some bad language. If they're fucking up cannabis this bad, just imagine what they're doing in the important departments and ministries in the government, like foreign affairs, right? The economy, national defense.
I have very little faith in governments.
Education.
Their motivation is wrong. Their backers are corrupt, and I have very little faith. I'm quite cynical about that.
But what can
so
be
that's,
done?
that's that side of it. There's another side of it that I wanted to roll around with you, and that's what's gone on with this motion that the Vancouver City Council has now approved to allow cannabis to be dispensed in that original exclusion zone of the Hastings downtown east side corridor. And not just dispensed as in having government stores there, but in fact not being able to be dispensed by government stores because it's going to be specifically to target the opioid crisis. And that'll be based on consultations with us at the Van Du and the CSP and with Sarah at the OPS and other people who use drugs is how they worded it in the amendment to the motion. So my understanding is that cities are allowed to break federal law when there's a crisis on the ground and they need to address it. That if the law is going to result in more harm than it's going to prevent, that they have an ability to change it with the anticipation that the laws will change at the federal level once it's understood what's necessary, but the city knows what's necessary, not the people in Ottawa who aren't in that city dealing with that. So because the cities have that power, and I guess that was somewhat verified by that recent court case where they said the city can pretty much make whatever laws they want. Well, the good news is on that is that they can also allow.
They could.
And they say that they will.
And why aren't they? Well,
now they say they will.
That's fantastic.
In this one municipality here.
But again,
any municipality can do this, by the way. Take it to your city council, and this is what cities can do to address the opioid crisis. It makes sense to have the availability of high-dose medical cannabis as a substitute, as a replacement. I mean, that's something that they should do.
I agree, and I think you have a history of a good operating and a great track record.
2.5 years now.
My biggest fear is look, what if I wanted to get rid of you and prevent what you're doing, I'd basically allow an LP to come in and call it Tweed Downtown East Side, and they replace what you're doing with their product and their edibles, while at the same time giving the city a big whack of money is, hey, thank you, no cost to you for us to get this up.
So far they can't do that though, with the Cannabis Act the way that it is, because they can't have.
But if they're going to allow you to do it,
right,
they could just as well allow Canopy to do it. And I can assure you that Lloyd's of London will be insuring cannabis sold by Canopy, whereas your cannabis, as good as it may be, is still tainted by the fact that it comes from a source that doesn't have the government tax stamp. Now, I agree with you. All of this is terrible. I would have loved to have seen the bar very low so that
it ain't going any higher, is it?
Well, who knows?
I don't think
Andrew Scheer is probably going to be our next prime minister.
Maybe
but I don't
Scheer.
think that's a bad thing. In fact, I think if you kill the drama teacher by replacing him with Andrew Scheer, that's your method by dismantling a lot of this liberal cannabis industry. It'll probably be taken down and replaced by something else, But guess what? That's your chance to then jump in on that, as opposed to whinging and complaining about how crappy it is to have liberal insiders, stifling any opportunity that you have. And this is why I think most people in the cannabis industry think, oh, we can't get rid of Justin. Cher's just going to legalize this back. No, they're going to replace the liberal game with probably a conservative game that would have made more sense in the first place. Of course, you're going to have a regulated industry, but who would have thought that cannabis industries would have been this much of an insider monopoly and a connection to the liberal government? So quite frankly, I'm happy for anything to replace that than to continue that. Sure, that might cause more problems for the environment down the road because the conservatives have their way, but the NDP aren't going to do anything. So honestly, I just see
they don't have the support.
I just see them NDP voters as either splitting the vote between liberal and conservative. And so I'm not saying I'm going to vote conservative, but I don't think the cannabis community owes Justin Trudeau any favors.
No.
I don't think they owe the Greens anything. It'd be nice if everyone voted Green, but let's be realistic.
Maybe.
NDP's had a wonderful opportunity for all these years to step in and say what's been done is terrible. And the BC NDPs, where have they been?
Oh, I know. John Horgan told me personally just before he became premier that he was going to lead the charge for medical
They've killed
access.
the BC industry, so why any
and we need to appeal
self-respecting
to them
British
at this point
Columbian
because
would vote NDP at the expense of getting rid of all of this with hopefully a fresh start with conservative? Again, I'm not a conservative, but
I hear what you're saying. I can't disagree that
I just think
there's opportunity
what?
for
Sometimes
change.
you gotta
And I started by saying I don't think it can get any
again.
worse. I don't think they can make it any worse. And then you said, well, conservatives. And I thought, oh, yeah, well. But you're right. Maybe they don't make it worse because they can't make it much worse. And there's a big outcry for them to make it better. And we know
But what's the
problems
incentive when the government passes something that they know is in favor of a select few, and then they put a moratorium for 5 years, nothing can be changed on that? Believe me, you got Andrew Scheer wanting the RCMP to investigate the Ethics Commission. Maybe the right cannabis lobby needs to be going to Ottawa and lobbying conservative with, hey, at least we know where the bodies are buried. Yeah. Let's help you nail up the conservatives. I'm just speaking objectively here on you're saying, how can we change things?
I know.
Well, that's something you can do outside the court, and you might even have a better result.
And you might not have a choice.
And it's less expensive.
He might get in, and then he's who we have to deal with. I've met him personally and chatted with him, and I don't like the idea of having to try to get him to see our side of it. But it's not just him.
He doesn't understand. And that's the thing. He doesn't understand. He doesn't want to understand. It's just something for him to deal with. I don't think the right people have gone to him and say, you know what, here's how we take the lemonade and turn it into, Tennessee lemonade or even better. Right?
Better, yeah.
And that's ultimately where I think it's just food for thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to get better. It's just going to consolidate this Trudeau insider empire. And at any point of the dealing with Justin Trudeau in cannabis, has he done anything as he's agreed?
Not the bulk of it.
So if Andrew Scheer does,
I know that if I had Mark
good,
Elias standing here right now, if Mark was in studio, Mark, a liberal, he's a campaigner. If Mark was here, like he did the other night when I met him and I started to complain about Trudeau, he had it all listed off of what Trudeau's done and right? So there's always two sides to everything, and we'll see how that all shakes down. It's tough to know what the right thing to do is here for sure,
Well, maybe this community needs more of a unified voice, because my observer as an outsider and being a lawyer who represents different people who are part of different factions and different groups in the spectrum, and I think things were a lot more unified and cohesive a few years ago.
Forced to unify again.
And I think now it's because everyone's broken and fractioned off. It's harder.
But we're reassembling. We're re-understanding what's going on and what we need. What we need is access to high quality, low cost flowers and extracts and high dose edibles. And it's that medical dispensing model of the topicals and the suppositories and the things that medical patients need, that we all need. Every human being has a need for these things and should have access to these things. And there should be no proving that you have a doctor who's going to confirm some diagnosis. No, all of that is total infringements on your personal privacy rights and medical privacy rights. People need to be able to walk into a place and get these things, and that's what we need. And so that there's now by their own definition, I mean, they've set the game, they've set the playing field. They are non-medical. They say that themselves. These are recreational stores, adult use stores is what they want to call them, and they're non-medical. Oh. Well, we need the medical. I mean, we got the decision in Allard where Judge Phelan said that the dispensaries are at the heart of access. So that now, to me, is the battle that's going to unify us, is we need to get behind the idea of these medical... They're going to be taken over by regulated government producers like, eventually.
They're gone. They're now a web page, maybe, right?
Well, not all of them.
There's a handful
of them. There's a handful left here in Vancouver, at least.
They're the exception, not the rule. And
oh, yeah, I know that.
The challenge, though, for them...
But we're at a turning point with that, and that's what I'm saying. With what we're doing,
you want to know what medical is going to look like?
I'll give you some inside information on what's happening with the CSP.
Okay.
I was going to save this for the segment, but we can talk a little bit about it here. We're incorporating. We have a board of directors. We have an advisory board, and we're in negotiations to get a storefront. And we will not only distribute cannabis the way we have been for free in care packs to people that can't afford it, but we'll have the ability for people to buy cannabis, high dose edibles, and low cost, good quality flowers and extracts to support the giveaway that want to do that. And we're going to use that model. And we're about to have a meeting with a bunch of players that all want to have that type of a store. And I think there's a bunch of those that are going to open up in response to what the city has done with this motion. And the big problem is the CSU. That is our big stumbling block at this point. This provincial enforcement body that's been going around and scaring all of these dispensaries into closing down and threatening them, they need to stand down with respect to the medical access for the opioid crisis, and it's for more than the opioid crisis, but that's what we've got council on board for right now. But the opioid crisis is in all parts of this town and all parts of Canada, and everybody needs to be able to walk in anonymously over the age of 16 and buy some high-dose edibles to get off the street drugs and to displace the use of that. All the barriers removed as best as possible. That's what these governments need to get behind. That's what we're going to get this city to get behind. And that can happen in every municipality, as I say. The stumbling block is the CSU, and the reason they're the stumbling block is because they're running a protection racket with our money to try to put all these other businesses out of business so that the government businesses can sell cannabis only. And that's fucking wrong by a mile, and I'd like to know your opinion on what we can do about that. But the big problem there is that, yes, having what I'm talking about and that we're doing and going to have more of, which is low cost, good quality flowers, concentrates, and high dose edibles, anybody can go there. It is going to be major competition that's going to put these other places out of business, but I don't necessarily need them out of business. We want them to evolve and change so that they can compete with what we're demanding.
Where are you getting your supply from?
Various suppliers. Various suppliers.
Are they licensed?
None of them. Other than for medical growers, some of them for sure are growing under medical licenses.
So there may be some wiggle room for
and 4 plants per household. So we've got people that are using those 4 plants to provide us with edibles to give out to people. Those are legal. That's all legal.
Well, but hold on, right? You might be able to grow 15 grams of tobacco.
But you can't sell it.
But then the minute that I sell,
I hear you, yeah.
Oh, you just hear me here. You got those. You roll those leaves or grind them and roll them and sell them as loosies in your convenience store. Oh, yeah, you better believe that's big problem. And that's essentially what you're doing. And at the time, this is why I'm saying that if an LP wanted to, they could essentially buy this program and fund it and get an exemption. Why? Because they're from a licensed source. And so the real barrier that you guys need to attack is the access and who can grow and who can distribute, because that should be a license that should meet some standard, reasonable requirements that then allow you to produce a small batch craft product that you can then use for distribution as you see fit. And distribution in this type of a manner, I think, is excellent. There should be more of this. But again, because you're dealing with this type of a problem on a municipality by municipality basis, what may work in Vancouver, as we saw with dispensaries, will be totally different than Victoria or these others. So I think really the question is, there's a lot to think about. You've got a lot of good ideas, but I think the stumbling block at the end of the day before a municipality will be fully on board, and endorsing.
Well, we're going to show them how it's done. And they acknowledged that at the council meeting when Marion from Vandu was speaking there. They said, we understand that you at Vandu are right there on the street and you know the problems and you know how to solve them, and that you have a history of going ahead and doing it even though it's not allowed, and then eventually, you know, the laws change.
How are we doing for time? I do got to run at
You
about
gotta
5.
I'm good. I would talk to you for another half an hour, Rob, but I mean, you have your schedule, and I'm so privileged to have you here.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be on here.
So maybe I can make sure I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the lack of actus rea and mens rea with respect to pot crimes.
Oh, that's a whole show,
That's a
Neil.
whole show, maybe. What the powers of the CSU are. Are you familiar with what powers the CSU have?
I would need to look into that.
Okay.
I'm
Because
not
we want
nearly as
to
familiar
approach
as
them
you are.
somehow, and I'm not sure if we do that through the Oregon government or directly or how, but we need to have a dialogue with them to make them understand that the city has the power to do what it is that they're trying to shut down.
And a lot of
they
groups
should
are
not.
talking to the city. You got to remember that not just your ideas of how things should be done, right, are being shared. I mean, I think, you got to look at this is that there's multiple groups trying to fill this void and lack of understanding. And
well, we're just going to do it, right?
And that's
what I'm saying. And that's what they understand too. We're doing it already. We've been doing it for 2.5 years. Now we're going to change it a little bit in that we're going to sell the items that we're giving away to also subsidize the giving away.
Yes.
And that's in response to what they said they would allow.
Perfect.
Distribution. They weren't expecting distribution for free.
Let's follow up on this.
All right, you got to go.
My brother's texting me.
Thank you
Where
so
are
much.
you?
Free legal advice is not easy to get. I can't thank you enough.
This is strictly for entertainment purposes. Not legal advice.
Oh, there'll be no litigation. We're not going to sue you for what you said.
Oh God, I hope not.
I hope not too.
Anyways, we'll see you all soon.
We'll see you, Rob. Thank you so much. So,
So we're taking a picture of everybody that is here today.
It's August 17th, 2019. This is episode number 210 or something. Times coming to Vandu to help people get off the street drugs and the opioids that are causing the opioid crisis. And so here we are about to serve this lineup with a whole bunch of edibles. Come and see what we're doing.
As you see, we got a lot of people in the lineup.
So here we are. We're inside Vandu. That's the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users. This is an organization funded by Coastal Health, run by users for users to advocate for ending the oppression caused by drug prohibition and the drug war and the war on poverty. And they're very nice to allow us to come in and use their space here. And we do this twice a week, every Thursday and every Sunday. Over here on the table, we've got some packaging going on here. We're just, at the last minute, they're putting things together here. We've got these. This is a donation, 200 milligrams. So we're cutting those up into a little more smaller doses. And then over here, this is where the main packaging goes on. This is where the ladies put everything into the care packs that we give out to people. There's typically 4 to 6 different items in those care packs, including a joint.
It's 1 or 2 to 4.
No. It's a cap, it's a gummy, it's something else, and it's a joint. We have at least 4 items in every bag that we do here.
I've never gotten less than 4 items in a bag.
Here we have the Holy Rollers, and they're rolling up the latest donation of weed into joints. People like the joints too. It's important to have joints, actually. Originally we were just going to use edibles for the project because it's edibles that really can offset the use of those harder drugs. But people like the joints, and the reason for that is that it takes a while for the edibles to kick in. So you smoke the joint, it gets you through till the edibles kick in, and away you go. So the joints are helpful as well. And this is what we're doing here. We've been doing this for 2.5 years. Shame on the government for not supporting us. Media really hasn't paid much attention to us either, yet what we're doing is huge. It's a criminal offense to be contravening the Cannabis Act at this point in this so-called fake legalization world that we've got here. but we're doing it. And the real good news is that City Council, because of our efforts and the efforts of High Hopes and the studies that have come out now about how cannabis is helping with people using it for pain and for addiction and for other things that are related to the opioid crisis, City Council in Vancouver has decided that they will allow the distribution of cannabis to offset the opioid crisis, which means high-dose edibles and low-cost good flowers and concentrates, which can't be supplied by the fake legalization government stores or the licensed producers. So it's really awesome that we get to do that. Here's John. Come on in, John. John's one of our favorite donators here. They're all favorite. But what do you got today, John? Sloppy Johns.
Oh,
and how
yay. Oh, yay. Lunch has just
between
arrived.
30 and 40 milligrams of infused Sloppy Johns. So, yeah, we're really helping people in a variety of different ways here. Obviously, cannabis helps in a variety of different things, but even food is good for people, too. So that's our week's report here, and we'll do others as the weeks go on. Yeah, the CSP is quite the going concern, as you can see there. Just a little bit of breaking news. We get to do that on this show as well when we find it, and it's an update to the Chris Enns story. He's also going to be in court tomorrow morning at 9:30 in Nova Scotia there in Halifax. So please go and support Chris. That's a very, very important step towards what we're trying to achieve here in fighting the oppression that's been happening. So, and the CSP is that as well. We've been for 2.5 years just handing out care packs of cannabis, high-dose edibles and other things. This is a bit of a generous care pack that I brought with me today because I wanted to include the different variations of things that we have. We have the full CBD. I don't know if you can see that. Is that coming up on the screen properly?
Yeah, I'll see a bit of it, not as much.
Okay, well, I'll do it this way then. So, Twisted Extracts is an excellent company, and we're able to hand out their products every time we go there. And they range from the full-on THC 80 milligrams to the full-on CBD 80 milligrams to the one-on-one 40 milligrams of each CBD and THC. And those ones we also have from our anonymous gummy maker who's trying to have packaging that he thinks will comply with what Health Canada is going to want down the road. But in the meantime, still afraid that his association with what we're doing and with his actual manufacturing of these will get him in trouble. So he's anonymous, but he also gives us, these ones are 300 milligrams per pack. There's 3 dinosaur gummy things in there, and they're each 100 milligrams. These ones, there's 20 pieces in each bag, and they're 5 milligrams each. And that's a way that people can just sort of microdose as they see fit. Some people tell me that one of these is all they need, and they're good for a couple hours as they're in their wheelchair strolling around. One particular fellow likes just the one at a time. Others, will eat whatever works for them. And so we have, a variety of other things. This is from the S&M Sweet Shop that is so good in donating, and they're still open as a medical dispensary and crossing their fingers that the threats will not be followed through by the CSU. We also have a couple of canna caps that we put in there. Those are 30 milligrams each from Dirty Dave. He's amazing. He makes sure we have a couple hundred of those caps every single time we're there. This one, I'm not sure who it was from, but last time we had the THC popcorn, 30 milligrams per there, very helpful for people. There again, you can microdose, use just a small amount or eat the whole bag, whatever you want. So those are essentially the care packs that we give out for free to people. We've been doing this for 2.5 years at the Cannabis Substitution Project, and we're now satisfying a lineup that's over 200 strong. Twice a week we go there every Thursday and Sunday at noon to Vandu, to 380 East Hastings in Vancouver, and we give out about 300 of these care packs every time we go twice a week. So that's our program with the CSP, but it's changing, and I got some really good things to report. Shout out to Justin. Had a really nice meeting today with a wonderful human being that turned his life around and claims that cannabis saved his life. And he's going to help us at the CSP. He's out looking right now for a storefront for us. So that's awesome. It's been in the works for a while, but we didn't know at the CSP which group we were going to be merging with. But this looks very promising that Justin's going to get that together, and before long we're going to have a storefront to move into, and we'll operate things a little differently than having a long lineup twice a week. We'll be there 5 or 6 days a week for 7 or 8 hours a day. We'll have cannabis high-dose edibles, low-cost flowers, concentrates, and extracts for sale for people that want to support our program and have access to those things at reasonable prices. We'll probably undercut the other stores a little bit because I think their prices are a bit high, and we're not in it to make money. We're in it to subsidize what we're doing and giving cannabis to people that can't afford it and addressing the opioid crisis. And that's what's at the heart of what this is all about, and that's why we're doing that like that. So we're looking at that. We've also now filed our paperwork to incorporate. We have a wonderful board of directors and another advisory board above that to help us guide what we're going to do with the CSP in the future. And this is all in response to the motion by the city to allow cannabis to be dispensed specifically for the opioid crisis. And this is a power, as I've mentioned a few times, and I'm going to continue to mention it because I want people out there in your different municipalities to understand what this means, that municipalities have the power to allow cannabis to be dispensed to address the opioid crisis outside of the Cannabis Act. It's a response to a crisis that they have the power to do, and they need to be doing it. So please lobby your local municipality to allow for dispensaries of those items, those high-dose edibles that are so important for people. They really, really, really help people, these gummies that are not going to be available in the government stores. The government stores are going to have edibles as of this December, but they're capped at 10 milligrams, which is the right dose for people that have never used it before, but it's nothing that's going to do anything for people that are using it for serious medical issues or for offsetting and replacing the use of opioids and street drugs. So good on the City of Vancouver for recognizing that they can do that and recognizing that they should do that, and that should be done in dispensaries, and these dispensaries should be allowed to open all across Canada, everywhere where the opioid crisis is hitting. So I think that's really huge news in moving the issue forward of having access to these things. And I know, as I talked with Rob Laurie just recently in our last segment, that that's going to compete unfairly with the government stores, which do not have low-cost, good-quality flowers. But that's just the way it is, and that's what needs to happen. And they need to get off of those high prices and stop and over-regulating this amazing herb that is safer than just about anything in your grocery store, anything in the drugstore, anything in your garden. There's 100 houseplants that people typically have in this area of the world, and all of them are dangerous and poisonous if consumed by your children, and they can all kill you if you eat too much of any of it, even the fruits and vegetables you're growing in your garden. They have LD50 ratings, and look that up, and you can die from eating too much of any of those. There's toxic levels to just about everything. Cannabis is at the very, very far low end of all of that. You can't kill yourself by eating too much. They figure the LD50 rating for cannabis is 1,500 pounds in 10 minutes. You'd probably kill somebody easier by dropping 1,500 pounds of cannabis on their head. But you can't overdose from it. It's a very safe, natural substance in our environment. One of the safest therapeutically active compounds known to man, said Judge Francis Young from the DEA. And so yeah, we need to push this issue. We need to have cannabis deregulated from the point that it is now to some regulations that make sense. There is room for warnings on high-dose edibles. There is room for warnings on concentrates and extracts that you can green out from that. But the regulation that they're putting on it, you would make it think that it had one of the lower LD50 ratings and that you could die easily from it, and that needs to stop. So here's one of the ways we're doing that. Here's one of the ways you can help us do that, is by getting your municipality to allow for a dispensary to open for medical patients, for people that are struggling with opioid addiction. And that's the best thing we can do right now. But the other thing that we can do right now is get behind these constitutional challenges that are happening. Chris Enns has his going on, as we just mentioned. He's back in court tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. in Halifax, so please go and support him if you can. And Jerry Martin has another constitutional challenge that's coming up, but we're not sure when, probably next spring, but you never know the way these things get pushed around. And I'm thrilled to be able to have Jerry on my show on a weekly basis to talk about what's going on with his case and other things to do with access to medical cannabis in our world. So Jerry, I think, is in the hot seat, and I'm going to move over and we can have a chat. How are you doing today, Jerry? Good? You're just going to say good? You're not going to talk about burning your arm?
Oh yeah, I forgot to burn my arm, yeah.
That's the thing with our world, eh?
It's alright, man.
You hurt yourself, you're not doing so well, things are going bad, people say, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. Everybody says they're doing fine. I have trouble with that sometimes. Not fine, you're just good. Well, I'm glad you're good. I know you're good. You're one of the better ones. So, and I think every week we're going to have people that have not viewed our show before, and so every week I'm going to give a little overview of what your case is all about here. Jerry was a dispensary owner in Whitewood, Saskatchewan. What were the years? Like, it was about a 4-year period. So from what year to what?
2012 to 2016.
So from 2012 to 2016, Jerry was helping the needs in his community in a small town in Whitewood, Saskatchewan, sort of halfway between Regina and Brandon. And he had about 1,000 members after being there for 4 years. And there's about 1,000 people that live there. And so people were coming from out of town as well. But he was really serving the majority of people in that area with their needs for medical cannabis. And, that was illegal. And it takes brave people to do that. And there was a lot of brave people doing that at that time. In Vancouver here, we had about 150 brave people that opened dispensaries without getting licenses from the city and doing what was against federal law and the criminal code, and doing it because it's the right thing to do, because it became apparent that medical cannabis was something that a lot of people in Canada really got relief from and needed. And in fact, many people say it saved their life. So Jerry eventually got a letter from Health Canada telling him to stop running his dispensary, and he didn't stop running his dispensary. And I hope that in the court case that's coming up, it really properly gets spoken to, that would be an impossible thing for somebody to do. If you've been running a dispensary for any length of time, even just a few months, but when you've been doing it for 4 years, when you've been doing it in a community that you live in that is a small community and you know everybody, you care about these people. You understand because they tell you how much the cannabis is helping them and how much they need it. And you can't stop doing that. And you're not going to stop doing that. Nobody would that had a conscience. Just because Health Canada comes along and says what you're doing is illegal, stop doing that. Well, damn it, we know it's illegal, but we can't stop doing it. Give us a license, let us keep doing it, come and see what we're doing. But that's not what happened. You kept doing it. Eventually, your local cops, local RCMP came and put you in handcuffs one day. We talked about that on the show last week. You were arrested, you were charged. There's been no trial yet, and that was back in 2016.
Yeah.
They've taken most of your stuff. They took your cars, your properties, and certainly your livelihood as they shut you down there eventually, had forced you out of town essentially. You're here in Vancouver now, unable to help people. They've given you a living hell, and I can be testimony to that. You're an emotional guy. You didn't ask for that. That's just who you are. You were on top of the world there helping people, I can imagine. You're a hero. You were called the King of Compassion. You didn't just help people get access to cannabis. You got the name King of Compassion because of the giving back to your community and to our community. Within the cannabis community, you helped the activists that needed help. You helped anybody you ever found that needed help, as far as I could understand. You lived your life just, finding out about people that needed help and helping them. And for 4 years you're doing that. I think you probably felt pretty good about yourself. I know I feel good about myself when I'm doing that type of thing and I'm helping people. I go to the CSP twice a week and I'm on seventh heaven there. I'm just like, wow, this is very cool to be part of. And I think that you felt that way. That's what I feel. And I think that having that taken away from you the way that it was, facing possible jail time, I don't think so, but you do, and that means it is possible. It's possible. Fuck it. Damn, I can't believe it. We're so backwards in this world. But it is a living hell, I think, to have to now be in this situation where you can no longer help those people. You've had your belongings taken away from you, and they're still threatening you with jail time and making you come before the courts.
That's far worse than any jail can be. Jail's just,
I feel for it. I want to say, but Jerry, you're out of jail. You can see all the sights of Vancouver right now. You're not there. But you're telling me, and I only got you to know that facing that, and I see how it affects you. I've seen, I've seen the hell you're in. And it's so not right, but it's still going on. You had a court case just recently. Between our last show and this show, there was a court date.
Right, court date, yeah.
That got pushed ahead to another court date?
Yeah, I believe so. I think we submitted our statement of facts.
Mm-hmm.
They said they sent us over a version of their facts, and then we altered that into, which I still don't think are facts, but we've agreed to them.
You've agreed that they believe those are facts,
yeah,
I guess.
Exactly, yeah, pretty much, yeah. In
Wow.
those terms. And so that'll go back to him, and then he'll say no, and da-da-da. So, but we're looking at spring, hopefully February or March, we can get this to court. And
Paul Lewin's your lawyer.
Paul's my lawyer, yeah.
And that's awesome because Paul's great. And Paul, I tried to call you, but I didn't get you personally, so I don't think I even left you a message. But I understand that Paul's willing to come on the show and talk, about your case, and that's awesome. And Paul's a lawyer, and lawyers need to be paid. It's not cheap. The work that they do requires a lot of money to go out, to get the case done. The copies aren't cheap, and people need to be so much. I know it's expensive. I have trouble relating sometimes. It's a different world than me. But I know it's an expensive. Lawyers are expensive, and they're very needed because they know things we don't know. They can navigate a system that is very difficult for a layman to do, and you're really, putting your liberty at risk if you try to do it without a lawyer. Sometimes the judges will respect that and help you, but really they don't because they think that you should have a lawyer, and so you should. So Jerry doesn't have a lot of money. He's had his dispensary shut down, and Paul needs to be paid. If you want to help with the cause, I would say that's a good place to put your money. These are the constitutional challenges are the most important things we have going on right now with keeping access to cannabis for medical purposes and getting those regulations that they got going on right now deregulated back to what cannabis should be required to have. And this is how we're fighting this fight. This is the unity that we need to fight this fight. And we've been doing it on many different fronts, but the most important one is in the courts. Those of you that put money towards the Allard case and the constitutional challenge for the concentrates, thank you. And that was money well spent. Those lawyers did an excellent job. It wasn't easy, and they won. And for that, we get to have our gardens as medical patients. We get to have access to whatever form of cannabis we want in concentrates and extracts. In fact, I think we've won the last 15 constitutional challenges, and maybe this one that's still now on appeal will go against that record that we had. But the courts have been favorable, although as Rob pointed out, it's like climbing a mountain going to court. It certainly isn't easy. There's a lot of bias. There's a lot of powerful influences going on in behind the scenes that, maybe they don't like to admit, but I think the corruption runs deep. And I think that if a judge is making $250,000 a year and he's supposed to be a judge, that it doesn't take much to judge right and wrong. And for whatever reason, it does seem to take a lot to convince a judge of what's right because they're very biased. In the case of cannabis, for sure. We have won those challenges, but we should have won those challenges because, I know Chris Bennett lost his way back many years ago on a religious basis of having access to cannabis. And I went to that court case, and it was a mockery. It was blasphemous. It was a travesty of justice. The end result in Chris not winning that case, with the evidence that was presented there. With the comparison to other substances and people's ability to use other substances in our society for religious purposes, based different harms, ludicrous judgment. That judge was obviously on the take. I don't know what else to say. He was either stone drunk, stupid, or on the case, or on the take. But I'm going to say that boldly. There's a lot of corruption in our country, and if we look deep, we'd find it. Yeah. And we have seen glimpses of it, lots. Our governments do not represent the spirit of Canadians, and that's really too bad.
It is. It's a shame is what it really is.
It really is. The spirit of Canadians is respected around the world because they know what a Canadian is. It's a tolerant, reasonable human being. Polite. I'm polite. I have to throw in polite. Sorry. I'm sorry I missed polite.
Pissed me off.
I'm sorry. It's not that we don't get upset about things, and it's not that we don't do shit. We do a lot of shit. We're active people. But, with respect to human rights, the rest of the world looks towards us, and we're not providing them with a very good model because of the governments that are supposed to represent us. I'm very disappointed many times in how our image is really put out there by these people. And what they've done with the cannabis file is a glaring example of not respecting human rights, of not understanding the harm in prosecuting consensual crimes between people. We still live in a world where I feel we've been kidnapped by the financial and corporate elite, and that they're still pulling all the strings on what we can and cannot do. And if it wasn't that way, there's no way that they'd be going after you for what you did. What you did was from your heart, helping people, knowing you were doing no harm, you never had anybody bring any complaints against you to
No.
we covered that last week about there's no malpractice suits as you're dispensing medicine, and you took that seriously. You're not a doctor,
seriously, yeah.
but you did your best to understand how to help people with this product. How many products did you have in your store again?
About 175 at the end.
175. That's not 175 strains of weed.
No, I think about 50 at the
About 50
in the
strains of
end,
weed. And do you count those 50 in the 175? So was there another 75 products besides that?
There's like I would just call that cannabis, and then I have
So that's one product.
capsules. But
So your cannabis flowers were one product, and you had 175 other products.
there's just there's many things you can do with cannabis.
There is, absolutely there is. And if you want to understand that, if you don't, just Google the endocannabinoid system. We have an interior cannabinoid system. Our body creates cannabinoids, whether or not you're consuming cannabis or not. We have cannabinoid receptors in our bodies because our bodies create cannabinoids. They have different
Protein
names.
receptors.
Anandamide is one of the cannabinoids that our body creates.
That's really good for the epilepsy. Leaving more anandamide. Helps with.
So yeah, it helps for a whole bunch of different things, and that's why. And that's why it's so wrong. I mean, cannabis is our. What would I call it? I was going to call it our relative. I was going to say it's our brother or our mother or something like that. But we have a relationship with this particular species of plant that goes back millennia. It is a stable food source and one of the best sources for just about everything the human body requires. In fact, they say Buddha lived for 6 years eating one hemp seed a day. And it contains within that seed all of the vitamins, proteins, nutrients, fiber, protein, essential fatty acids, everything like glove on a hand that you could require.
Lock and a key.
Is in there. And so this amazing natural plant, and we're made out of plants. We eat plants. You are what you eat. We eat plants. And this plant in nature is one that our ancestors ate before we were even humans. You can argue that one if you like sometime. But all the vertebrates on the planet also have evolved these cannabinoid receptors. They all have an endocannabinoid system. And some of the non-vertebrates.
Fresh trim and
they like it. They migrate toward it. They'll eat your stash if you leave it out.
Well, they eat the plants, right?
And they'll eat the plants, and then the deers will eat the plants, and the rabbits will eat the plants. And
Mojo doesn't like it so much anymore.
It's an amazing source of what we need as life on this planet. It's a cycle of life that involves breathing and water and plants. And love. Love's got to be in there in my opinion too. But those are the necessities of life. And the plants heal us. In fact, all the pharmaceuticals are simply attempts to mimic what the healing herbs do in nature and to synthesize the active ingredients in those plants and then be able to mass produce them. But it's all plant-based because we are plant-based as animals and people and life forms on this planet. And this one particular plant, we have such a symbiotic history with that goes back obviously such millennia.
Long time.
That we've evolved these cannabinoid receptors, and that's why when you go to a dispensary, if you see the long list of different ailments that it can help you with, and the different categories from the CBD to the THC to the CBN and the other ones that have different effects and help people in different ways, the list of things that it helps with is so huge, and that's why. So to have that plant prohibited, to have you facing what you've been facing, you've already been through 10 years of jail in the 4 years they've been threatening you with by the feel of it, and be glad when your sentence is over and they finally say, okay, you're not going to jail. Well, thanks, I just did 10 years, thank you very much, Feels like it anyway.
Take a nap, I tell you.
But, you're helping people get access to this amazing plant that anybody with an ounce of ability to research anything could pretty quickly figure out. It was only prohibited with lies to protect the interests of people that wanted to provide medicine and provide fuel and other industrial applications for cannabis, that the whole prohibition was made completely up, lied through their teeth about it, and it's the most valuable plant on the planet. It's the plant that's least likely to hurt anybody ever in any way.
I haven't seen it helping any community really yet. I haven't seen it helping any mental health.
I don't know what they're doing with the tax dollars they're collecting. They collected $186,000 worth of tax money in the first 6 months for cannabis sales.
Well, I mean, the promises just aren't there.
I don't know. Maybe they're going to tell us down the road what they're doing with all that money and how they're helping people. But so far, they can't. because even all the money they're collecting, they're still losing more than they're collecting.
Oh, of course they
you know,
are.
I mean, some levels of government are getting their tax
have
money, but the
300
other levels
million
of government
a year
that are
or
running the stores, they're losing the money. So I mean, they haven't.
Those CEOs aren't losing money.
No, probably
They're
not.
getting big bucks.
In fact, they're still getting awards for themselves. You know, the stupid awards.
I see-
The
you
grow
know
up.
what?
Fuck them.
Here's
Did
sweet
you hear that, Jerry? I don't mean to interrupt you, but did you hear what you probably didn't. You probably weren't here. There's an
did hear.
awards gala coming up for the licensed producers, for the legal pot sellers. 2019. There's. What?
I did see it.
It's called Grow Up. It's called Grow Up. Is what it's called. Fuck them.
My comment. I don't like a lot of it, but there's a couple guys on that list.
Oh, I like a
got
couple
mad
guys on the
respect
list because
for
the
it.
list is super huge.
Like Remo and Ed Rossnell.
We need guys on the inside, too.
A long time, so those guys deserve awards. So I removed
Sure
my
they
comment. But the whole
the
but
concept,
the
the whole concept of the thing, you know,
all our concepts.
they are,
and
they
they're
are.
just making them their own.
They're trying to say that they were the pioneers that got free, that finally got legalization.
I
and,
don't agree with that at all.
oh no,
That
I'm mad
pisses me
about all
off.
of that. They need to stop doing that. We need to have a bridging of these two communities for sure. And I know that privately, Jody said so when I interviewed her, that privately the licensed producers are thanking her, you know, for the efforts that she did on behalf of getting it to where it is right now.
I just got a response from the International Cannabis Business Centers.
Okay.
I just said lots of laugh to one of their emails about it being legalized and posted a link to my case, and they just said they were aware of the illusion.
You're aware of the illusion
So
of
I give
legalization.
respect for that because I didn't
Yeah.
hear it.
Yeah, it's an illusion so far. It's like, you know, freedom in this country only exists for one person. And that's Justin Trudeau at this moment. Only the
Trudeau
Prime Minister
cartel, I
only
call it.
actually has freedom. Everybody else is subject to that man.
You know,
and,
and he's broken these laws himself. You
well,
know?
that's what I mean. He has the freedom to break these laws. He has the freedom to do just about whatever he wants and
It's
make
not that
whatever.
he's freedom. He's actually done
And it's
that.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's wrong. Our dumbocracy is wrong. We need to really revisit what we think we've got here in the way of a free country and public servants and us being sovereign beings. Rob Laurie used that word, sovereign, in describing the powers of the legislature and the courts to decide things for us. That they get to decide these things. They get they can go through the illusion of saying they had public input and they do all of that, but they are allowed to do that. And I think that they should be allowed to do that, perhaps, if they've met that criteria that he says they're supposed to meet, and if they did it more objectively than they do. But to do things is fine, but to keep doing things when it's very clear and can be demonstrated that what you're doing is wrong, that's where our sovereignty comes into play, in my opinion.
Fortunately, what
That
we
we
really
are
need
sovereign
is going to take a
beings.
long, long time, and what we need is judges and lawyers and
Police.
medical community and police that are cannabis activists. So
Yes.
if there's young guys out there and young ladies
And,
that are
and,
watching,
and
they
not
should
cannabis
get it.
activists so much as rights activists. This is about right and wrong. This is a much deeper issue than just
Absolutely.
cannabis. This is what cannabis is. What illustrates what's so wrong about our world, that this can be like this, that people can be paid as policemen to come and barge into your house in riot gear and arrest your plants.
3. There's a 3. Those poor people.
And in your case, because you had a store where you're helping people out, come in and take all the rest of your stuff too.
They left
I mean,
my 15 seedlings.
they always leave
But
something.
they took half my equipment.
They don't care really, because it's not about protecting the community from those plants that they didn't take or the stash that they missed. They always miss something on these raids because it's not really about that.
They did about
It's about punishing you for not obeying. It's about protecting the powers that be that want you to consume and produce for them. And you know, if their actual motivation was public safety and there really being some danger that they're trying to protect us from, well, things would be a lot different. They would
Speaking
do
of
things a
that,
lot
that's
different.
why they're bringing in Vanessa's law.
Yeah, tell me about Vanessa's law. What's
you know,
that about?
I was just really just got up the nerve to look it up after 3.5 years.
Well, there's some not good stuff in that, isn't there? There's some good
it's
stuff, or what is
it's
it?
called the Vanessa's law, and because I didn't comply to the Health Canada letter that they sent by a certain date,
Right.
they would bring in this Vanessa's law.
This
And
law is against you.
yeah.
When I read the title of it, I thought it was something you could use against the government because of their unreasonable drug laws. But I've read that wrong, didn't I?
That's wrong, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So in the letter that was sent by Health Canada, it was 2 years and $5 million fine I could be facing for not complying.
Wow.
But, and then if I did not comply, they would bring in Vanessa's law that could increase those fines. So as I'm finally reading this here, I see that doesn't really matter there. They'll recall my products. They took all my products and, impose tough new penalties for unsafe products, including more jail time and new fines up to $5 million per day instead of the current $5,000. So that's per day.
Wow.
It's an operation for 4 years. I don't know how that works.
Holy shit, Jerry.
Provide the courts with discretion to impose even stronger fines if violations were caused intentionally. So I could face more than that.
So dangerous products. Where's some evidence that there's dangerous products?
They get to keep all the shit they stole, right? Now, compel drug companies to provide labels that won't affect me. Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy anyways. And how will this benefit the Canadians underneath? We'll get into that another time. I can't read that. Got no glasses on.
What's it designed to do? Who are they trying? Was that designed for medical cannabis dispensaries?
Well, there's probably it's the Food and Drug Act. Is what they're bringing.
They're after somebody selling.
They bring in all kinds of laws when you don't.
But they're after people selling dangerous products that are unlicensed.
Exactly. Basically, yeah.
Well, cannabis has been proven to be one of the safer products.
That's correct.
And as we've covered a couple of times
just
now,
like aspirin,
you have no malpractice
testing. It's a known safe product, right? That's just the way. That's the way it works, right? If you don't comply, then they hit you with tougher penalties and more jail time and more threats and more fear, right? Because that's how it all comes down to is control and fear.
And they have, and I wish Rob would have spent more time with me, but they have no onus on them to show that there's justification for what they're doing.
No, they don't. And they don't care.
They don't have to prove that you hurt anybody.
They get their check and their bonus, and then
We need those people to be activists.
We
need all good Canadians to stop.
I thought about being a crooked cop, and it should have been when it would have been more profitable.
Well, it depends on what you call profitable. If you're just talking money, then maybe, and security.
This is why I gave up everything that I could have had back.
The most valuable thing in any man's life is how you feel about yourself.
Exactly.
That you're the only one you have to answer to.
Yeah. And
you're usually the worst critic.
Yeah. For sure.
And pleasing yourself and the ethics that your mama taught you, is the only one you should have to answer to, unless there's some significant evidence that you've done something that's harmed somebody in a significant way. And that's what's so wrong about all this. That's what I fight for. That's the bottom line for me, is that nobody has the right to tell you to do stuff or not do stuff after your parents. Your parents have that right, your guardians, if you will. When you're brought here and you're tiny and you don't know nothing, you can't even talk, and you got to learn everything. Well, thank God nature provides most of us with some people to look after us in that period of time. And during that period of time, damn it, they get to be a bully if they want. They get to tell you to do stuff you don't want to do. You can't do what you want. Eat this, do this, don't do that. But that's nature, because those people usually love you. They usually have your best interests in mind, and they care with the experience that they have. And that's why they're charged with that, and that's why I guess that's okay. It's not always okay.
Definitely not okay.
Definitely not always okay. But that's nature, and that's the way it is. But once a person gets to that point where, and I don't know if it's an age or if it's a moment in time, or how it comes.
A moment in time.
I think it's more a moment in time.
Your life
where you're now your functioning self, and you're going to say to your parents, who now don't understand what your best interests are.
If you're allowed to vote on your country,
sure,
you should be allowed to make your own decisions.
If you can drive a car, a 2,000-pound weapon, if you can join the army,
clearly you can think.
You can think, and that's that moment in time. There is that epiphany in a person's life, and the parents know it, and the child knows it. Because the child's not a child at that moment anymore. No. And that child says, thank you, I love you, I appreciate you, I don't agree with all of your values, and I'm going to be my own person now. And I'm going to go live my life and be a good man, a good woman, and I'm going to just take what you've given me, take what I've learned, and be that moment in
And
time.
in a lot
From
of
that
cultures,
moment
that's
on,
at a very
for
young
me, I was
age.
16 basically when I had that epiphany moment of understanding my parents weren't right about everything, even though they thought they were, and I was going to live my own life and figure it out for myself and be my own self. Everybody has that moment whenever it is.
About 4 for me.
Once you have that moment in time, from that point on, nobody else gets to bully you again, period. It just isn't. They do because they're powerful, and it's not right. It's just never right to be bullied again after that. You do what you want to do. You don't do what you don't want to do. You don't hurt other people, because that right comes with a responsibility. Not only do you not hurt other people in what you do, but you don't let other people hurt other people either. There's more to that than natural rights. And I'm talking about the natural rights that really supersede everything else.
You get in trouble for that.
I know.
Some fucker in the head
because
for,
these kings and queens, pharaohs, tyrants, dictators, those that have ruled, by power, those people never were right in what they were doing.
Into your own house in Canada, and you protect yourself, you're going to jail, man.
The state has taken so much power. That couple in Revelstoke that had the 3 plants. Your house is your castle, supposedly. Yeah. They had 3 plants growing out in their garden there. There was a public showing of gardens like they have in Revelstoke. And next thing they know, the police are ransacking their house.
Yeah,
before the police come and ransack your house, there better be a damn good reason for that.
It's a small town, so they knew them.
Yeah, of course.
And
now they know what Mrs. So-and-so has in her private drawers.
Yeah.
Like, before anybody before the government comes into your home, they better have a damn good reason for that. Like a damn good, whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to off with their heads? Whatever happened to town hall meetings where we march out in revolt against the government and demand that, we've lost our way because they've distracted us and they've put so many layers of different baffled gaff in front of us that we can't make our way through the legal system anymore. We try, but it's an uphill battle is what we're told.
There's new laws now.
I know, always new laws. They never take away the old laws. They just keep making new laws. The new bunch gets in.
I've seen the states you can do 10 years now for being a protester.
For being a protester, exactly. Just for being on the pipeline protest.
10 years.
Even on Aboriginal territory, Indigenous land. Yeah. No, they've really.
Those laws are coming here.
This rotating group of 4-year dictatorships
14 years
that are manipulated by the corporate elite have seized power over us and kidnapped all of us, and we are slave and subject to their whims, and they get them through the politicians and through lobbying and all that stuff.
It's encourage anybody to check out The Family on Netflix. That's an interesting story. Yeah, it's really interesting.
I will do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I got my own joint here. I need this stuff, this cannabis stuff.
Yeah, me too. Daily.
Because I got tuned in to all the stuff we've been talking about here, and right and wrong. I always was interested in right and wrong. I had interest in the law.
Yeah, you do something that's right because you know it's right, and then you get punished for it.
Yeah.
I can't
knew that was
going to happen in the beginning, but so harshly is what really got to me.
Yeah.
And the repetitive.
It's not. So you didn't expect to get punished, right?
Was it yesterday, the day before, with the RCMP officer commenting on that comment? Yeah, he's coming. You going to jail, Jerry, or looking forward to going to jail, Jerry?
It was RCMP.
Oh yeah. I found out which detachment it's from and everything.
Oh, well, isn't that interesting that they're watching?
My lawyer's away, so I contacted Jack Lloyd, and he just said to keep track of all this stuff, and we'll sue them for this after.
I'm glad they're watching and paying attention. I hope they're listening.
Well, yeah, but do you think after all those years they're still watching? Right? Was that important? Yeah. And I think I was, because I made a big difference in that community, and not just the community, that whole province and throughout Canada, helping different people, changing their views on cannabis, and because of that, a lot of people's lives were changed. A lot of people's lives were definitely educated, for sure. At least they had an option.
And when you say changed, you mean like in a positive way?
Yeah, definitely in a positive way. Maybe not for some of them. Might have been negative. Where some of this, the church groups did not like that, some of them, and not necessarily all the people attending there, just, the powers that be. And not all of them either. The Catholic Church actually came over and shook my hand later on. And he said, Jerry, I see Shoppers Drug Mart is getting into the business now. And I got to shake your hand and respect you for standing up and doing for what you believe in.
Because you never expected to get punished.
Not like that. I knew I'd get arrested. I knew I'd get charged. Yeah, for sure.
After the letter.
I was kind of hoping they would come and, say, Jerry, like they're doing in other communities.
Your original idea was that you were going to be transitioned in and allowed to do what you were doing eventually.
Well, that was, for them, to do.
I mean, you didn't go into it thinking you were going to be arrested. You thought you were going to be arrested after the Health Canada.
No, I went into it thought I was going to be arrested.
Was that right? Oh, good for you. I appreciate that.
I didn't think maybe 5 days, but the years went on and on. And,
I know when we opened the herb school, we looked up at the sign we just put up and went, well, we're open. We've lasted one day. It might be all, but
I went to the guy that approached me with this said it's a gray area, it's legal, and I knew it wasn't quite legal, but
all these dispensaries in Vancouver going on.
He pitched the Stanley brothers down to me, all the children that he's helping, and and look how things turned out for them. So hey, why not? Why not give it a shot, right?
What you're doing is you're standing up to them. You never took a deal. You're making them play their whole game out, and in doing so, you're exposing just how corrupt they are and just how wrong it is. And you're giving me this platform and us this platform to talk about what's not right in this world, and we're trying to change it. We need examples, and yours is a great example of what's not right. What's your next court date?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
No.
Well, you'll let us know. You'll be back
asking.
next week, and you'll let us know.
It's Paul's on holidays for a week, so.
Yeah.
So he'll let me know, but it's probably just going to be another. I got some. Actually, I do have some documents I've got to read. But they're more from witnesses. Doctor.
Oh, okay.
One of the doctors that are witnesses.
Let's do that for the next show.
Yeah. And, I'll find out if we can go over some of these witnesses. I'm not sure how much stuff I should be sharing on the show and stuff.
Make sure you know what you should do with that.
I've let a lot of my own firepower out there for them. I don't want to give them much more.
Right. I know.
Yeah, so we'll find out what he can say and what he can't.
But speaking truth to power and speaking the truth is, you usually can't go too far wrong, but there's sometimes you want to just zip it because the people you're dealing with you can't trust. And we're up against a pretty nasty, corrupt animal here with this corporate takeover of our democracy. And you got to be really careful when you're talking to the man what you do and don't say. So, we're still playing that game, unfortunately. We want a real world where we can all just, speak our truths and live our lives, and nobody wants to hurt anybody else, and that'd be very nice, but it's going to take a while. So thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate you coming on again. Like I said, we're going to do it every week. It's extremely important. It's the battle that needs to be fought. This is for the sick and suffering Canadians and their ability to access the medicine that'll save their lives. And why the hell should any public servant be getting in the way of any sick person getting something that can give them relief? And that's just so wrong, and we're just not going to stop saying it's so wrong until it gets straightened out somehow. So
for sure, I encourage everybody to start microdosing.
There you go, or dosing in whatever way works for you.
For sure.
All right.
Okay, man.
Thank you very much. So now we have. Should I go back to the other camera? Gotta put me back over there.
You can do wherever you like.
Yeah.
I'll go back over there. A little movement's a good thing.
Take the mic.
Take the mic. Come on over here, Mike. I got this nice little dab thing given to me there, so we'll use that to put Mike on. And should do like the other. I'll do that. All right. There's a few things coming up. We've talked about what's not right, some of what's not right. There's a bunch more that's not right. And, there's some things going on that help us change these things. It can be overwhelming. I know for a lot of my life, it was quite overwhelming. I was very upset about the state of the world and everything. And I didn't do much about it. I did, some things. I'd call open line shows once in a while with comments on different things. And I did put up some signs that said gas the jail conspirators for rush hour traffic to see a number of times in the middle of the night. I got up with a 4x8 sheet of plywood prior to, taking part in the 420 rallies that changed my life. But up until my son turned 16 and decided that he should smoke weed with his dad, and I decided that now he's going to be a criminal and maybe it'd be nice to do something about that. I just lived my life feeling overwhelmed about all the different problems in the world, so many things that are not right, and so many different bandwagons that a person could jump on, and the people on the bandwagons usually have a personal axe to grind, because of something that happened to them that led them to that particular bandwagon. But for me, I just didn't like the whole state of affairs. I didn't like the corruption in our governance, in the way our democracy is structured, that these corporate lobbyists can get access to our politicians and bribe them and threaten them into following policy that serves the interests of the corporate elite and not the people, us. And it's bothered me all my life, and I managed to find a way to do something about it. I get to feel every day like I'm doing something about it, and that's a really good way to feel. It's way better than feeling overwhelmed about a sick world. So if you don't like the world and you think it's fucked up and you want to try to unfuck the world, well, I'm hoping that we're giving you some opportunity to do that, and that you'll learn some things on this show that'll help you be better prepared and armed in doing that, and you'll find some ways that work, and we can all do what we can to bother the powers that be into doing the right thing. And whatever is your role and whatever you're passionate about, well, join the crew and be the crew, and I think that you'll find that that's a really good way to live, throwing a wrench into the operations of the man who's just there to oppress us and future generations. So some of the coming events that are happening that you can take part in, that help network with people and help educate and have some fun at the same time. I'm a big believer in having some fun with what we do and living a good life and enjoying yourself, and it's fun to help people, and it's fun to throw a wrench into the works of the man. But we got the 420 golf tournament coming up August 25th. That's this next Sunday. I was hoping to have a representative on the show today, but they couldn't make it. They had a medical emergency to deal with. I think they're going to be okay though. But that's one of the better events coming up. The 420 golf tournament, I think it's its 6th annual now, has been just a fabulous event on the Squamish golf course, where the golf course is handed right over to the event organizers. They have dab carts running around as you do your round of golf. There's different stations set up for sampling different things, and it's definitely a day to consume cannabis and have a whole lot of fun with a whole lot of very cool people that show up from all across Canada and other places to take part. And go to that if you can. Check them out. Info at cannabisgrowers.ca. I believe is the correct website. I said .com, but I'm sure if you just put in Cannabis Growers, it'll come up and you'll be able to find the links that'll take you to being able to take part in the 420 golf tournament.
Spell out 4.
FORE20 golf tournament. I'm sure you'll find it. And support those folks as well. They've been doing great work in furthering our issues with the access to medical cannabis and people growing their own medicine and that type of thing as well. Another event is the Karma Cup. Coming up September 7th and 8th. This is our awards show, one of our many awards show on the illegal side of the cannabis world at this point. Screw those people with their legal cannabis awards. I don't like it at all. I guess I'm glad a few friends of mine are in that. I'm glad we got some people on the inside doing good work to get this situation back to where it should be, where we have proper access to this amazing plant without a whole bunch of government restrictions, and get the criminal aspect right out of it. There should be no crime for anything to do with cannabis for sure. And the Karma Cup, like I say, is one of these events where we judge the different types of cannabis that are being produced in the underground market. And that's a very important thing that happens, because medical users need to know which of the products are best going to work for them. So to gather a whole bunch of very cool and astute people together for a weekend of imbibing and networking and all of that is a wonderful thing that's been going on for a while. And the Karma Cup, I don't think anybody does it better with respect to the amount of stuff in their judges' kits for people to judge. And that's coming up September 7th and 8th, and they send their judges' kits out early, so get on that one pretty quick so that you have time to get the judges' kit. I think it's a week early, because you need time to test all that stuff properly. You can't just do it on a weekend. So do that one fairly quickly. Cheech and Chong, pioneers in the industry, for a long time, just made stupid stoner funny, which, caused a bit of stigma, and I had some issues with that, but you know, I loved them anyway, and they made me laugh a lot. And so much of my childhood was spent rolling around on the floor laughing my guts out about you know, the stuff that they were doing, and they certainly helped keep the issue of cannabis and what it really did to people in the forefront, even though it does a lot more than just make people silly and forgetful on the odd time. It's actually a focusing tool and helps people function more than it's a stupid stoner tool. But I love what they're doing these days, because they're showing that, you know, people that consumed way too much, you know, all kinds of psychedelic and things in cannabis can grow old and be healthy and be alert and articulate and do what a lot of people that were stuck on alcohol or, you know, that went the pharmaceutical route or whatever other route you take. I mean, these guys are really nailing it, that you can be bright and on it and rich and healthy even after you spent most of your days imbibing what is considered to be way too much. So good on them. And you know, even though I don't think they need any more money, I'm sure we should still give them the love and attention, and they're still going to entertain. They are funny as hell, and on top of all that, they're still funny as hell. Yeah, they put on a good show. The Calgary Hemp Fest is happening October 11th. I know they're still looking for sponsors, and I don't know much about that event, but I think that if there's some of the activists I'm aware of in Alberta involved, then it's got to be a great thing, because there's some really good people in Alberta that have been doing a lot of great things there. And so the Calgary Hemp Fest is coming up October 11th. I think those people, by the time we get close, will have given me some more information on that, and I can tell you what the lineup is or other things about that. There's the Prairie Harvest Medicinal Cup coming up November 8th, 9th, and 10th. That is the Friendly Cup in Saskatoon. Been going on for quite a while. I don't know how many annual now, but lots. And they do just a fabulous job of standing up against bad laws, bringing the medical community together, and having a wonderful weekend of good people and good cannabis and good times going on at the Prairie Harvest Medicinal Cup, and we'll tell you more about that as we get closer to that event. And that's it for the coming events that we have here. On Monday, we have the 420 Lifestyle Show with Carly Marley and BC Bud Gal and all the current stuff going on, and they just have a great lot of fun on their show, so tune in and see them. On Tuesday, I'll be back with the THC show. We hope we give you some truth, some hope, and some change. And on Wednesday, it's From Under the Influence with Greg Williams and his co-hosts. Always a good time had there. Cookies there lots of times. Al the Alchemist, and they have a great show as well. On Friday, it's Jeremiah with Cannabis Culture News Live. Definitely all the current events. Jeremiah has his finger on the pulse of everything going on in the cannabis world, and he brings that to you in his very special, unique way. Lots of guests and lots of topics covered on that show, and hopefully he'll be back on Friday. And on Saturday, it's High Noon with Boss Lissa and her revolving group of co-hosts. And yeah, that's what's going on. I guess we did another show. 3. And whoever's still watching, thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing me into your life and into your head. And I hope that we don't disappoint. We'll get better as we go. We'll try to have all the top people in the industry to tell us about the real stuff that's going on, as we got with Rob Laurie today and Jody and Dana, and more to come. Next week, I believe we're going to have. Is it next week? What's the date today? Yes, I believe we're going to have Brian. Well, anyway, I'll leave that until we're sure. Nick didn't show up. You just never know. Surprises are good. I'll post it at the last minute. Stay tuned anyway. Have as much fun as you can changing the world, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.